Hi, everybody. It is Cara from the Pocket Occupational Therapist, and I'm here with Harkla. And I hope that you can see me okay. And if you can, just go ahead and text in the chat box, and I'm going to text and just say hi, everyone. And there you go. Go ahead and let me know if you're here and watching and what your discipline is, if you're a parent or an educator or a therapist. And we're going to be doing this every week, so I'm excited that you're here. Good, very good. I see a few people that are here, and I'm so excited to be here with Harkla today, I am wearing a weighted blanket while I'm doing this because I have to tell you, this is my first Facebook Live video. I speak all over the world and country, but I am a little bit nervous because I have never done a Facebook Live, so I thought I'd wear one of our amazing weighted blankets, and it's beautiful in color, and it's very calming to me. So let's talk a little bit about, I thought today we could just discuss sensory processing disorder and some basics of sensory processing disorder and why things like the weighted blankets work. So let's just start with our basic body. And we know that we have 5 senses, right? And those 5 senses are smell, sight, taste, touch, and we commonly know them as like hearing and just the 5 senses, but really our body cannot function with just those 5 senses that we typically know about. So it's interesting when I usually talk to people, they think, oh, I didn't know there were more than 5. There are actually 8 senses. So 8 senses make your body function appropriately in your environment, which is so neat, right? So basically what we have is this position sense. So if I close my eyes, and you all could do it with me, when you close your eyes, you know when you put your arm up in the air that your arm's up in the air. You know that if you're crossing your feet, and you could do this with me, that your feet are crossed. You're not looking at your feet and you're not looking at your arm up in the air, but you know where your body is in space. And that sense is called proprioception. And it comes from our joints and receptors that in our body that actually can tell us where we are. So that's very important. And what we're going to talk about is why then do these blankets help? So if your body doesn't know where it is in space, it's kind of confusing. So if you had your eyes closed and you thought, I can't figure out where I am, then we would have I'm an occupational therapist, by the way. So as an OT, I would have someone I'm working with, a child or an adult, look at their body and say, okay, now your body's up in the air, but yes, I'm seeing that, but I'm not feeling it as much. So what we do then as therapists is work on things like joint compressions or nice squeezes to our body and just helping our body know where we are in space so that we can have an awareness, because what we see in kids that don't have this proprioception or body awareness is they crash, they run into things, they seem a little bit like they're kind of klutzy. You may say this in your child, you may see your child, or you may even lean on the desk, and different types of seeking behaviors. So what happens is we see kids that want to crash into us and bump into us, and they also, because they want to get the sensation of feeling where their body is in space. So I think that's frustrating for a lot of people that have poor proprioceptive awareness. That means they're having trouble knowing where they are in space, and a lot of our kids need that. So what we do is that we use things like this our Harkla weighted blanket that is so amazing to provide us information. So it's weighted and it gives us that extra calming pressure that lets our body know where it is and just feels so comfortable. And what we found in our research as we researched these blankets and proprioceptive activities is that when they work, they really, really work well for kids. And if they don't work, then you'll know it pretty quickly. So, just see if things like squeezing your child or they have these new spandex or lycra materials. So what you could try is going even to some craft stores, or even I think some box stores, and I don't want to mention any names, but some of the big box stores and craft stores have they have this spandex or lycra material, and you could just cut a circle of it and sew it and have your child kind of push and resist against it to let the child's body know, hey, there's some feedback, we know where we are in space. So it's exciting to know that there's things we can do. We can also do massage. So we can squeeze and massage our kids and just nicely, and it's also very calming. So generally when we find as occupational therapists that we're working on the body and calming activity or joint activities like heavy work, which we'll talk about in a minute, they're generally calming, because when we use a lot of big body parts and we use heavier things, we are calmed. And that is a wonderful thing, right? To feel calm and secure and safe in your environment. So that's really awesome. And I'm excited that you can maybe learn something about this proprioceptive sense. So let's also talk then about if you don't have, if you don't have a sense, but there are kids that have too much awareness of where their body is. So there's two different types when we look at sensory processing issues. So there is this proprioceptive, which is where we are in space, but there's kids that don't know enough about it. So that's called, in the medical word, hyposensitive. So they're hypo or low responsive to joint position. But then there's the opposite. There are kids that are super duper sensitive in their bodies. And those are the kids that you might find where they bump into something and they respond in a very unexpected way, is how we would say it. So there are definitely two types of people when you're talking about sensory processing dysfunction. There are those that are super responsive, which is hyper responsive, and then those are seekers, which are hypo-responsive. So I hope that makes sense to you. That's very important to know why your child or you may even feel that behavior. So some of the other things that we could talk about with this is when you have a child that benefits from these weighted blankets and things, we can have then things like spandex. So I talked about getting that. But the other thing you could try is wearing things like Under Armour garments. So tighter garments that are fitting to the child and cozy. So I might even suggest that if your child is one that prefers to be tight and squeezed and hugged, you could even try under the shirts wearing tighter things. So there are very expensive garments, and one of the companies that's wonderful but pretty expensive is Spio, S-P-I-O. They have amazing compression garments for people that need craving. But then there's also, you can try cheap things. So I recommend going to, again, another store and buying tighter t-shirts, maybe nice soft cotton shirts that give a nice little bit of compression, and put them underneath of the child's shirt and see if that compression is calming. And there's no on or off wearing schedule for these kinds of things. So if you're going to wear some maybe tighter spandex pants underneath of another pair of jeans or something, or a tighter shirt underneath of the regular shirt, to see if your child or you even benefit from the feeling of that hug. You don't have to take them off halfway through the day or anything like that. You can just let them wear them all day long and just see if that benefits them. So those are the suggestions that I can give you. But again, this Harkla weighted blanket is amazing, and I love it because it's very soft and washable. So this is just something that I'm just infatuated with, actually. We'll talk about that in a later video that we're going to be doing about weighted blankets and my infatuation with them. But I do feel very calm now and relaxed since I've had my blanket on me. So let's now talk about a few other senses. we talked about the fact that there's this proprioception, but there's also this movement sense. It's a sense of position. So here's an interesting thing for you to kind of think about. If you're in a vehicle and you're sleeping, have you ever fallen asleep in the car and you wake up and think, oh, whoa, I'm moving, where am I? You know, that's kind of an odd sensation that we have, right? So it's this closing your eyes and knowing you're moving. That's called vestibular. So when your body is rocking back and forth or side to side, or if your body is moving around in circles, there actually are receptors that detect movement, whether the movement is in a rotary, which is a circle fashion, or a linear, which is back and forth fashion. Those are actually located in your inner ear. So did you ever notice that when you have an ear infection, you might have some dizziness and actually nausea that comes along with it? You may feel like when you get up, oh, the room's spinning, because you're not aware, because the inner ear might have pressure on it. So that's interesting, because if you think about how disorienting that is to you with an ear infection, what about those kids and adults that have that all of the time because of sensory processing disorder? So they may be feeling, whoa, woozy or dizzy or disoriented a lot of the time. And I can't even imagine how frustrating that would be. And a lot of kids are afraid then to move. So we've got kids then that are afraid to climb up on playground equipment. And you might see your child or other children that you're working with. And if you're a teacher, you might have noticed this at recess. The kids that are afraid to move because it's uncomfortable, they may be walking around the playground in a circle around the perimeter instead of actually exploring the equipment. So they're so afraid of moving that they're actually not even willing to climb up the ladder or slide down the slide. There are also sometimes a lot of people that come to me for therapy will say, oh, I want to pick up my baby and swing him, but he vomits every time or he screams every time. Well, that's probably you're seeing some early signs of vestibular discomfort in the child. So that's something to keep in mind, that, you know, everything happens for a reason in kids, and I believe that every child wants to succeed and wants to do well. So what we've got to do as therapists and as parents and teachers is to figure out why our children are acting the way they are. And chances are it could be in sensory processing disorder. One of their senses is not responding appropriately. Now, I mentioned that there are 8 senses. So let's go through them again. Sight, smell, touch, taste, hearing. We talked about proprioception and vestibular. But what's the 8th one? This is kind of a newer area, and I'm actually writing a book right now about it, but it's called interoception, Interoception. And that interoception is what makes Cara, and what makes you, you. It's actually the feelings that we have inside, not only emotionally, but physically. So I know when I'm nauseated. I know when I'm hungry. You don't know when I'm hungry. You know when you're hungry. So it's basically the internal clock, the internal feelings that you have. That's interoception. So it's inside of you. And those receptors are actually in the body's organs. And so when you stretch inside, you could feel that stretch happening inside of your chest. You can feel when you're flustered or upset. You can feel your heart pounding in your head sometimes, right? So when you have that heart pounding in your head feeling, that's your interoceptive awareness pumping, letting you know, giving you a physical cue that your body is excited. So that's also helpful when it's basically a survival mechanism, right? So our body automatically, through our nervous system, responds to stresses in the environment, right? So if a child is touched or brushed up, say in line, or if you brush up against your child or go to hug him or her and they back away, their heart rate may go up a little bit because they're actually interpreting that as dangerous. When that happens, they may feel increased heart rate or some stress in their body, a little bit of a tightness, and you might even see that in a startle kind of response. But when that all happens, their body is telling them through heart rate and through maybe like a shallow breath that there may be a danger. So that's just a protection mechanism. And of course, we need to talk about the fact that with interoception, when you're hungry, your body knows it. It's got to know it because you don't want to die of starvation. So it's a basic survival skill. The other thing that I'm often asked about, and it's really no laughing matter, is toileting. So with sensory processing disorder, a lot of our kids have trouble with toileting. And I didn't mention this before, but both of my own children have sensory processing disorder and high functioning autism. So it's interesting to me because my job dictates, that I love it, but I work with kids with special needs and I live with them. So I've definitely seen that there is this trouble with toileting. So we can spend an entire maybe live session in a few sessions from now talking about toileting tips. But for now, I'm just going to say that there are a lot of kids whose bodies simply don't tell them when they need to use the restroom and when they don't. So that's why you may see them becoming constipated and holding in their bowel movements or having an accident. So their body, again, is either hypo or less aware of actually the fact that they need to eliminate waste. And further, they may need to always use the restroom, which is not typical either, right? But their body may be super sensitive to the feeling of fullness in the bowels. So now we've learned about our 8 senses, which is so exciting. So let's talk about it because we have a little bit, probably about 10 or 15 more minutes. Some things that we can just general overview today. I don't want anybody to get overwhelmed, but with sensory processing. So back to the swinging in the vestibular system. I know at Harkla we sell some awesome pod swings, and those are amazing because they are so comforting, because if you look at them and go on harkla.co, it's amazing because these swings are and come in different colors, but they are really cool because they are in a pod form. So and there's air in the bottom, and they're giving the nice cozy sensation of being comfortable. It's similar to the weighted blanket. And further, they are giving a movement sense. So what does that even mean, and how does movement help kids? Well, basically, generally, now everybody's different, so I always have to say generally, but in most cases, kids and adults, when they're swinging back and forth, so that's called, oops, I'm sorry, my dog just appeared behind me. I just noticed. I apologize. She just got cozy right there. So anyway, okay, I have a good question here, so we're going to talk about that. I see some really awesome questions. So basically, when we rock back and forth, and when we move what's called linearly, again, or back and forth, it's generally calming for us. However, when we spin in circles, it's most likely alerting. So if you feel super, super tired, the wrong thing to do would be to sit in a rocking chair, right? Because what are you going to do? Fall asleep. So if you want to stay awake at night and watch a movie with your husband or your kids and you're feeling sleepy, the wrong thing to do would be to sit in a rocking chair, right? So what you could do is do a few spins or jumping jacks. So movement in all different planes in a rotary motion, which is circular, or in an unorganized way, like woo, is generally stimulating or alerts the sensory system. So it wakes it up some. So yeah, so now I have a few questions, and the first one is, what is sensory? So sensory, basically, that's a really good question because we're talking about basics today. Sensory is the way that your body makes sense of the environment. So what you have is this environment around you, okay, and you've got your body. And what your body needs to do is make sense of that environment, and you need to match where you are emotionally to that environment. So there are a few ways that we make sense of what's around us. And one of the most wonderful ways is we're wired through our different senses to interpret information or bring in information about our surroundings. And when sensory processing or integration works well, it's beautiful, because I'm in a very busy work environment let's just, for example, say I'm very busy at work and I've got typewriters next to me and I've got phones ringing. I've got to kind of be able to block all that out and focus on what I'm supposed to do, right? So that's so hard for a lot of us with sensory processing disorder, isn't it? One of the basic premises of sensory processing disorder is the inability to block out things that we don't need to know. So the sensory system is beautifully designed to block out unnecessary information so that we can focus on what we feel is important at the time. So that's the thing, is that when it doesn't work, it's so frustrating, because think about yourself for a minute. If you're in your office working and you've got everything coming at you with equal intensity, so the phone's then ringing, the people are talking. What about your neighbor cracking gum? Maybe she's cracking gum. So instead of being able to block all that out and think, okay, I've got to focus on my report that's due, then it's really hard, because you're seeing everything as equally important. It is going to drive you wacky, right? That's what a lot of our kids have in school. They have this trouble with seeing stimulation and knowing what's really important to pay attention to. So everything in their body is perceived at the same intensity, and that is so frustrating for them. So that's why they usually come to occupational therapy, and we can then help to assess. So basically, to answer your question and some of the others, is what do you do if you think your child has sensory processing disorder? So you want to make sure you go to the doctor and ask for a prescription for occupational therapy, because we are specifically trained in looking at remember the systems I said, the vision. We have assessments for the tactile, which is touch systems. We have to look at taste and how a child eats and how they perceive motion and touch and those kinds of things. And then we design a special program just for the child. And that is the beautiful thing about therapy, is it's individually fitting your child's needs or your particular needs. So for me, this weighted blanket, and I'm going to wrap myself in again, I just love it. It's so comfortable, and it just has enough weight to it that I am just calm. And I'm a really fast talker, and guys, I have to tell you that you may think I'm talking fast, but for me, this is not fast, because I feel a sense of position on my body. So sometimes there's a weighted lap pad that you can use, and at Harkla we have them too, but just weight or pressure on a joint can generally be calming. So we didn't get to touch a lot today. So that's we know as touch is one of our basic 5 senses, right? Is touch, feel. But it's not just touching something hot and knowing, oh, that's the stove, I don't want to touch it. It's also touching other people, other things, the pencil. And this is something interesting. We'll just kind of talk about this at the end, is that, there's those kids that have trouble knowing how hard to push on the pencil, and they're breaking their lead all the time. They're squeezing you when they hug you too hard. They're doing that because they might not be able to tell how much pressure their body is using. So grading is one way of saying that. So not being able to tell how much pressure you're using or force you're using is, in the technical world, called difficulty grading the strength that you need. So that's maybe a problem that a lot of people with sensory processing disorder have. So as you can see, if you have maybe sensory processing disorder trouble with your vision, you may be looking around the room and seeing everything that moves, and whoa, you're super responsive to it, and that may even cause some nausea, some dizziness, some headaches and things. So I think my point today, as we kind of wrap up, we only have about 5 minutes left, is that I really want you to just know that sensory is supposed to be comfortable to us. We're supposed to form this appropriate response to where we are. And when that doesn't happen, it's called sensory processing disorder. And that can be in many different places. So it's neat for me as a parent to look at my kids now that I'm knowing all this information. So maybe if you want to, you could kind of keep a journal, and you could say, okay, my son is really overreacting, in my opinion, freaking out about vision. Or when the light's too bright, he goes like this. So then write it down. Okay, doesn't like bright lights. So then maybe, he might have visual response, hyper responsive or over responsive to visual. Or if they need and respond to lycra spandex and weighted blankets, then they might respond better to some extra big hugs and squeezes from mom or dad, or some lycra wrapped around them. There's even these things, this technique called TheraBand. It's not a technique, but it's a product called TheraBand. It's basically a stretchy rubber band that they use in physical and occupational therapy and exercise. Now, I think they're using it, but on Amazon, it's readily available. But you're using this stretchy band to kind of pull and do some exercises. And sometimes in classrooms, they're putting TheraBand around the feet of the chairs so that kids can push to fidget with their feet while they're in class. And that is actually we are actually finding out that is really good for them to move their feet against this rubber band material, because it gives them more input into their joints and to their feet. So that's kind of cool too. So that's where, again, we are giving them more of what they need. They're responding better because they're able to calm and focus better. So as a rule of thumb, I want you to just kind of take one thing away from today, is that heavy things sometimes, but not too heavy, but heavier things like these weighted blankets and lap pads and heavy work activities such as pushing, pulling, lifting, and carrying. So carrying a backpack with a couple books in it is heavy work, and that is generally calming for the joints. So what's calming overall? It's linear motion. So back and forth rocking is generally calming, and pushing, pulling, lifting, or carrying, because you're really giving input into those joints. Like I stated, they might need heavy work. You know what else is a fun thing to do for heavy work? And you could try it over the weekend and let us know how it worked, is animal walks. Walking like a dog. So saying to your child, maybe this weekend, go out and say, we're going to walk on our all fours like a puppy or cat, or we're going to hop like a frog, or we're going to slither on the ground like a snake. So when the body uses the large muscle groups and joints like the elbows, hips, knees, those big, large joints, when we use them, it's calming to our kids most of the time. So animal walks are fun. Hop like a kangaroo. You can just go on the internet and think about all the animals, walk and trot and waddle like a big elephant and make your trunk out there, and just practice some animal walks with your child. So again, animal walks, moving front to back, and putting pressure on the child, just gentle pressure, all are very calming. So I think you answered the question, what is sensory integration, or sensory in general, and just how we make sense of the world. And sometimes when it doesn't work, guys, it can be very frustrating for us, right? And I think it's interesting, as you go through your day, see how you respond to things in your environment. Are you able to block out noises in your environment, or do you feel like, oh my gosh, you know what, I can't block that out, that my child's chewing potato chips right next to me. That's really irritating to me. So just in the next week, until I think Nicole's going to be with you again next week. No, I think it's not going to be Nicole. I'm sorry. But we are going to do this every week, and it's so exciting because think of questions that you have. Think of things that you want us to answer, and I would be so happy to answer these questions for you. And type them into Harkla, and just email us or post on our Facebook page, and let us know what you need, and maybe some topics that you'd like, and some questions that we can answer for you. Because the whole point of all of this is just to help you to understand why your child is experiencing these things, and as adults, why you are too. I think a lot of times as adults, we think that we've always been this way, but you know what? There are things that can help you now. I'm an adult, and I just learned about weighted blankets in the last 5 years, and they have really changed my life. So, there are life-changing things. So the other really cool thing is that Harkla has a blog. We have a blog, and we focus on sensory, we focus on autism, and all kinds of different diagnosis and things to do in daily life to help your family to function better. So that's just growing too. So any ideas you have, let us know. But we're just here to help you, and anything we can do is helpful. And I love learning information from readers, and I love teaching. So thank you guys for joining us today on Harkla Live, and have a great weekend. And do try to see how animal walks and rocking and spinning, do a little experiment with spinning on yourself. Whoa, spinning, but don't fall. And see how you feel after doing these activities, and try them with your kids. Have fun with your kids, because you're building memories together. That's the most important thing, is that you are doing these activities together and realizing about learning how your body responds to the environment together in fun ways. So that's what we want you to do. Okay, guys, thank you so much, and it's been great to see you today on Friday, and I guess it's June the 2nd, so happy summer. A lot of people are done with school, so hopefully we'll have time to do a lot of these fun activities. All right, everybody, I'll see you. Thank you.